The sun shone out over the calm gray river, its waves lapping softly against the mossy shore. Vegetation grew unobstructed over a sign that once read Crete. The decaying sign was lying in the grass by the side of a forgotten road. On the riverbank, Blue laid motionless in the grass and dirt. To his back was the forgotten road which wound a few miles leading into the ghetto. In front of him was the river, and beyond that, the ocean to the great city. Blue stirred in the morning light. He blinked, opening his eyes. Blue felt the grass beneath him and noticed the breeze and the flowers swaying near his cheeks. He sat up and stared out across the waters, taking in the majestic sight of the city far away. As the sun rose, its golden light shone across the windows of the city's skyscrapers, reflecting across the water like glittering jewels. The skyline stretched on for miles in either direction. Layers upon layers of steel and metal and glass as far as the eye could see. Blue sat in the grass with his arms around his knees, listening to the sounds of the water and the trees. He vaguely recalled traveling down a hill and into some strange ghetto, but after the smell of roses, everything went blank. Blue scratched his head, wondering what it was that he'd forgotten. He rubbed his chest, feeling strangely lost and empty. Blue wanted to cry, and so he did. He didn't know how much time had passed as he sat there on the shore, and he didn't care. Time seemed to stop for Blue. He wept until his tears ran dry, then stared out at the lonely sea breakers. Morning turned to afternoon, and afternoon spilled into the evening. The sun began to set in the sky, painting pink and orange streaks across the clouds and the glass across the sea. Watching the waves, Blue felt a stirring in his heart and a hunger that he hadn't known before. He didn't know how he'd gotten to the river, and he didn't have any friends to tell him who he was. He would have to carve out an existence of his own in this strange new world. Not knowing where else to go or what to do, Blue decided there and then that he would travel to the dazzling city across the water. He would wander until he reached the heart of the metallic jungle to learn where he was going and where he had been. He shook his head, dizzy and confused. Blue's small purple heart thudded with anticipation. There were secrets to learn, undiscovered feelings that yearned for Blue's attention and embrace. He settled into his new identity, comforted by the dreams that he'd begun nurturing. The empty feeling retreated back into one of the dark corners of Blue as he shakily stood in the night air. Mist from the river mingled with the breeze, refreshing the wobbling man in ragged clothes. Blue watched as the city twinkled against the blackening sky, its windows and street lamps lit like a million stars. As he stood with the soft earth beneath his feet, he wondered how he would cross the wide gray river to gain access to the sea. The water churned and bubbled as it flowed, cloudy and thick. Its dark depths were concealed from view. The rocky shore continued on in either direction, offering no clues as to how Blue would cross. He would need a raft, he thought. Blue watched the black waves lapping the shore. In the distance to his right, a couple of miles away, was a lighthouse built atop a pile of boulders that stretched out into the river. Its light had long been extinguished from disuse, and the once white walls were now crumbling and gray. It looked as though it might collapse at any minute. Guided by curiosity and a desire to reach the city, Blue set off one step at a time towards the lighthouse with no light. After walking a ways on the sand and grass that lined the shore, Blue came upon a crumbling brick path. It was overgrown, grass sprouting between the cracks, but it was a reliable route to the lighthouse that now called to him. He looked up at the stars and smiled, embracing the muted night songs of the crickets in the swaying grass. The gurgling water at his side eased his racing mind. Blue welcomed a familiar feeling as he felt himself disappearing into the moment. His senses lightened as he opened to the sensations around him, losing himself to the night. Just as relief came, Blue felt a sudden jolt in his heart as he remembered the flash of a red gown and fire. Panic seized him as he began scrambling to return to his senses. Stupid, stupid, he shouted aloud, cursing the infantile dreams he'd only just begun nurturing. Suddenly, there were no crickets or wind, only a persistent ringing in Blue's ears that wailed louder with each doubt that filled his mind. The ragged man fell to his knees, clutching his chest. He could not remember how to move through the world, how to tell his story. It was too easy to be changed, to lose himself to the chaos around him. How would he find his way home without his light, his sense of self to guide him? Fresh tears streamed down Blue's cheeks as he clambered back to his feet, trudging on through the grass and sand in spite of his trembling heart. Blue walked along to the lighthouse, wondering if anyone had ever found their way without a light to guide them. He knew that to dream meant jumping into the unknown, but the unknown was such a vast and scary place. If Blue lost himself to the stories unfolding in the world around him, to the flowers blooming, the seasons changing, the people wailing, how would he return again to what he was before? How would Blue learn to differentiate himself from the inevitable wounds that came with dreaming? The emptiness inside of him bloomed, gaping. After a while, and without realizing it, Blue staggered up to the lighthouse, its crumbling walls momentarily distracting him from his melancholy. The waves washed against the base of the tower, which had been built into the boulders rising out of the water. Blue's eyes wandered up the wall of the tower, stopping at a small, dark window near the top. Decades or more of wind and rain had battered and cracked the stone. Chunks of it lay crumbled around the foundation where it had fallen. Blue began encircling the lighthouse, curious about its origins. There were no dates of any kind on the building, no clues as to its age. A few small, broken wooden crates lay on the ground near the door of the structure. Blue stepped near, and as he did, 3 large rats scurried over and under his feet from beneath the planks. In the darkness, he heard them more than he saw them, their squeaks and scratches fading away into the grassy field beyond. Blue looked up at the tall, heavy wooden door before him. It had clearly withstood years of batterings from the elements. He ran his hands along the gnarled and splintered wood, listening for any sounds inside. Hearing nothing, Blue reached for the door handle only to find that there wasn't one. The door was a solid mass of wood without any windows or handles to speak of. He looked at the door and then at the small window near the roof 30 feet above, wondering how he would get inside. The door didn't budge when Blue gently pushed against it. He pushed a bit harder and the door cracked slightly, but he realized there was something on the other side blocking his way. Blue peeked into the small crack that he'd made, but in the darkness of the night, he could not see inside. Backing away from the door, he looked up at the old building once again, its bulb at the top, surrounded by a glass enclosure, seemed cold and distant, its purpose unfulfilled. Just beneath it, Blue once again noticed the small, dark window. He decided that this would be his way inside.